I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All The Mons. Now, last episode, we fully automated the production of Poké Snacks, which may or may not have involved automating the milking of Milk Tank. But today is the day that all of this preparation is really going to pay off, because today we should be able to fully automate the catching and the spawning of shiny Pokemon. Cobblemon. Okay, so how exactly are we going to do this? Well, I think for this, we're going to have to pop on over to the test world so I can explain the fundamentals of how the Poké Snacks work in the first place. So now here we are over in the test world, and as of right now, I essentially have the tick speed set up to about 3000, and you can modify this with the random tick speed rule right here to be able to test this much faster. And so essentially, we have this currently blocked off, and this Poké Snack has nowhere that it can actually spawn Mons currently. But the reason it can't spawn Mons is honestly kind of strange and is going to be the way that we can exploit this. Now, the Poké Snack itself has a range where it can spawn things that are on the X and the Z coordinate. So essentially, it can go out 8 blocks this way and 8 blocks this way. And the border that you see right here is actually 1 block further away from its actual spawn location. So it technically, so long as it stays in this center position, shouldn't be able to place any Mons out here. And so this means that its actual range around the Poké Snack is 17 blocks. And so if you build a farm around this that is 19 by 19, well, then the interior space is the space where the Mons will technically spawn. But another strange mechanic is that even if I currently have the tick speed increased and I give this a place to spawn, it's not actually spawning anything. And that's because it doesn't actually have a starting position at the moment. This is because the Poké Snack is technically looking for a vertical position, and it is checking 64 blocks up and 64 blocks down, and it is looking at a very specific corner. And that corner is actually the northwest corner. And so this is within its bounding box, and this corner is the corner that it is checking to see if there is a valid spawn. And so as soon as I place a block here, well, we now got things spawning, which is kind of interesting. And so if we let this guy go, the only place that they can spawn now is actually on the position that it is, available to spawn on. And so this is actually checking. The odd thing is we can adjust the Y value up to 64 blocks up and down. So we could technically take this spot and we could place it up here. And then if we remove this, we should get Mons that actually spawn up on this one, which is kind of funny. But it also takes priority of the Y value. So before, with this being down here, that vertical range actually mattered. But in this case, you can see right here, well, they're now spawning up here. So yes, the position that this block exists in actually allows us to determine where Mons can spawn entirely. So you're now wondering, how exactly are you going to exploit this? Well, at the moment, this is going really fast, but it's primarily due to, like I said, that random tick speed. But if we set it back to the random tick speed that is normal, well, the process of getting Mons with just 1 cake is just not going to cut it. Over here, I have a much larger setup than this. And essentially, I have taken this bound and I've expanded it out 1 to be able to make sure that it can handle a 3x3 area like this filled with cakes. Because now, with it being a 3x3, we're going to have to keep in mind that all of these cakes positions are essentially going to be looking for a 3x3 that is still centered on the original position. And so we get this as my idea. I basically took the original design that we have over here and we've expanded it quite a bit. So the level that the cakes are is the levels that I'm going to have my actual Mons spawn, which is going to be on this platform. And then we need to make sure that the bounding area around this is far enough away from this so that way Mons do not actually spawn on these glass blocks. And then this was to simply represent that up in the sky, we need to make sure that up to at least 64 blocks, there is no other block on this corner that it can actually interact with. Because remember, that can actually change the Y position where the Mons can actually spawn. And then on top of this, I have entity conveyors because I did find that Mons are not spawning on these, and I'm actually unsure why, but it is good to have a block up top that the Mons can't spawn on because, believe it or not, they can actually spawn on top of the cakes. And so with this, the goal is to get only this area where the Mons actually spawn at. So now we just make sure that our random tick speed is set to the default, which is 3. And then down here, I'm going to put in my puller card, and then this area is going to fill up with the regular cakes. And this is just using a placer, which is how I plan on doing this in our world. And so with all of these placed in, once it actually goes through its first little cycle, it should really start to kick off, and Mons should start spawning right here. And there we go. And so there's one, there's the other. Oh, and it does look like the conveyor belts are definitely spawning Mons. I do have a solution to this, by the way. So it's interesting that the conveyor platforms are allowing Mons to spawn, because when I originally tested this, I couldn't actually get them to do this. But what we could do is just place in solid blocks above the height level that these are technically looking at. And so for this, I just had to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks. Because of this being the base position, they actually can no longer spawn up at this level, which is how I had this glass set up here to sort of represent that. And so now this is the only place that they can spawn, as you can see, which is beautiful. Now, just so you understand how this works, our base cake, which is right here in the center, we go out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 blocks out from the actual center. And then from the center point here, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We land on what is the position that the farm is utilizing to validate the fact that it can even spawn anything in the first place. And so this is pretty important, and it is very specific, by the way, to the northwest side. Because that is the center of the cake, the other cakes are also looking for a position, and so I have given their position by just simply surrounding it much like we would over here. And so yes, all of these are technically setting the spawn positions for all of these cakes in this list to be able to work. And so technically this farm is 100% working, and we don't even need this glass anymore, and we can actually see how simple this farm can actually be. It literally just looks like this. Now, some things to note: you do want to keep this roughly 64 blocks off the ground. If you are going to put this on the ground, you do need to make sure that you have that bounding area cleared out. And yeah, it is going to spawn anywhere within the center, if not 64 blocks above something. Another thing to note, the player also has to be within 64 block radius of the actual cakes for the cakes to work also. Now, I am going to have a full schematic over on the Discord of our finished product, so definitely be sure to check that out. But when you build something out like this in creative, something really cool that you can do is you can go ahead and define out, much like this, a schematic for it. And then you can position this in the world and be able to see your setup. Not even using the schematic cannon to place it in, but being able to visualize where everything goes can also be very handy. Now, back in my world, I have our Mon farm, which I'm just simply going to use to place the schematic in, so that way we can actually see where this gets positioned. Now, with the schematic in place, and I basically have it defined where I want it to go for now, we can start working on building the platforms and also defining all of the locations for things. And this is the fun part, because I want to make this something that I can pick up and move anywhere I want. We want this to be modular because these Mons are biome specific. After taking the original design and getting this set up, I've also decorated the top a little bit. So now we have a little Pokeball on the top, but the big part is going to be in the catching department, and we also have to figure out how we're going to send power and a couple of other things to this. For one, we need to make sure that we can get cakes into the block placer. Now, I have an idea for this. We could use dimensional chests. So if we place down a dimensional chest, we just have to make sure that our cut paste gadget can actually cut this and send it over. So let's set it to a frequency of 16. We'll go ahead and change that, make sure it is locked into that. And then in our cut paste gadget, we'll right click and then shift right click. We now have it selected and we want to cut it. Now, when we paste it back in, we need to make sure that it still stays on a frequency of 16, and it does. And this is big, because this now means that we can hook this up into a system, for example, with a modular router, and we can pull items out of it. Now we got to make sure that a pipe system will also work when being moved, and modular routers is really good at that. So a setup like this will be modular routers, and then we'll have a sender, which will go up to be sending items in, and then we'll have a puller that is going to pull items from the down, which is going to pull items from our chest, our dimensional chest, with a frequency of 16. So anything that goes in here will be pulled into the buffer of the modular router, and then the modular router will send that item into the advanced block placer. Now, the next part is going to be a little bit harder because we need to make sure that we have some way of sending wireless power, and we also need to make sure that it can be potentially picked up with a cut paste gadget. And I'm actually unsure if we can gadget the gates. So I do want to see, can we use this on a gate? If I click on here, shift right click, we now have it selected. Can we cut it and move it? Surprisingly, yes. I actually was not expecting it to be able to move this. So if it can move this, well, we've just basically solved this whole problem. Yeah, I think it can be pasted. Of course, it had nowhere to paste here. And so I can use something like an energy transmitter, and we can define this area to just simply power the thing that we want it to power. And I love that if we do paste these, it's just going to keep its position as it's positioned on itself, which makes this so much better. And I think the gate for this can just be attached directly to the bottom of this. Actually, I think this has to be moved down. Yeah, because this has some weird placement like this. Okay, so yes, this will go here, and then we will place this on top, and then we'll continue to move that up, and there we go. So now this is powered, and then this is powering this. Now, the fun part of seeing if we can actually cut this. So there's the position. We can cut it, but can we paste it back in? That is the trick. So we want to make sure that we have this lined up correctly and that we can see it. And I think this is actually going inside of it. So if we drop it down, there we go. We can see that that's positioned correctly. And when we place it in after anchoring it, is it going to place it in? Okay, so yes, this is a problem, as I thought. The actual gates themselves cannot be pasted in. For this, I have another idea. What if I use another mod that is quite old, honestly, quite old, to wirelessly send power? And thus, I present to you the dimensional cell. This is the advanced version in particular. So what we can do is just simply select sides by default. And so we can say this is going to be an input, so it's going to pull in power. And then we place in a card here, and we have it linked to this one. And then we can bind this power cell card to this cell. And placing this in, we now have a cell that is linked together. And so we can set this one to output power. And so if I put power on the side, we should also see that this power is now filling up. And the combined value of their containers also build upon a network. So what I'm thinking is we can take this power cell and potentially use this so long as it holds its information. So we can set this to output. It is linked. And can we cut this? Because this is going to be kind of important. All right, so we'll see. We have these. We will go to cut. They get cut out of the world. And then we want to anchor and paste them back in. Do they hold all of their settings? Oh my goodness, they do. And old mod come in clutch. Look at that. And so there we go. The easy part of the entire system is basically done. We have the machine that is going to place in the cakes automatically, and we have that now set up. The hard part is, how do we capture mobs that spawn and filter them and then also actually catch them? Only if they're shiny, that is. Well, this process is significantly more difficult. Now, as of right now, I don't know if mons require very specific materials in order to spawn. Like, I don't know if they require grass, for example, to actually spawn on. I think they can spawn on just about any material. And as of right now, I'm going to rely on the fact that they can basically spawn on just about any block, as I have found out. And so what I'm going to do here is use simple clickers then to click on the mobs that essentially spawn right up here. So if they spawn on this platform, these clickers should be able to target specifically passive mobs and just simply right click. And I'm going to have them right click in industrial foregoing what used to be called Safari Ball, but is now called a mob imprisonment tool, which kind of makes a lot of sense. So just to test this out, if we go ahead and put the empty mob imprisonment tool in here, target to passive, and then we have another mon that we've captured in here and we place it on top, notice it has now been captured and is inside. And we can do the same thing, placing it. And if we place it nearby, it still will technically pick it up, but I'm unsure of how close it might actually have to be. So this might be, we might be able to get away. Yeah, we might be able to get away here with just having a single clicker, which honestly is going to be really nice if that's the case. But here's where things are going to get a little bit more complicated, because we need to pull out once there is a mon in here, but not pull out if it's just a regular imprisonment tool. Now, I think modular routers should be able to handle this by just simply looking at the MBT data. And this should be pretty easy to test. We are going to pull with a puller module from the upside. And what we want to do is we want to blacklist pulling of these regular mob imprisonment tools to make sure that it will pull these. And I'm thinking we can do this by doing mob imprisonment tool blacklist and then match all data. And so as of right now, this is the only one that it will not pull, which is an empty one. And so I'm hoping that it won't actually pull the other one in. Otherwise, we are going to have some more problems. So if I put this in, it's not pulling it into its buffer, which is exactly what we want to see. But if I put this one in, is it going to pull into the buffer? Okay, so here is where we encounter our first problem, because this should definitely be pulling any of the items that are inside here. But maybe instead of match any, we do components instead. So we need to match the item's components. Let's see if this actually works. Okay, and so we did see that this did pull out the Pokemon one, which is nice, the one that had it in there, but is not pulling out the imprisonment tool. Okay, so instead of using match any data, we will set this to any and then set it to match item components, which I guess is the MBT because now everything is component based, right? So yeah, essentially we're blacklisting the regular mob imprisonment tool from being pulled in, which is fantastic. We've already solved our first problem. So to test this out, we place in the mon was then captured, and then notice it sent this out. So now we can take this and we can send it out somewhere else. And the cool part about modular routers is it can actually send items anywhere throughout the world. We don't need a chest for this. We can just simply send this all the way back to our base, no matter where it's at. To do this, we need a sender Mark III. So now here's the fun part. I'm going to have a test tube that I think I'm going to build in this corner. And this test tube is going to be like the catching test tube. And then we're going to have another test tube. And this test tube is going to be the one that destroys the unwanted mons. Now, this is going to be pretty fun because with these test tubes, I'm going to play around with the new Crystallix mod. This is a way that you can basically change glass and give glass a ton of different properties, change colors, and all kinds of fun stuff. And we end up with these really nice clear tubes. But like I said, if you hold down V while holding the Crystallix wand, we have a bunch of different settings. So like transparent, waterlogged, reinforced, which is kind of crazy. But also we can change the color and whether it emits light and all kinds of other fun stuff. So this, in my opinion, is really sick. Let's say I set this to a red color. And so now we have the color defined as red, and I can click this to change it. As of right now, it didn't actually hold its color, but I think that's because we have to turn on the color mode. To do this, by the way, you hit Control to turn on or off color. But with all the glass here, I can hold Shift, and when I do this, it's going to apply all of those settings to it. That's so cool. And so there we go. We have the red and the blue pill. Now that I have the tubes, we can go ahead and use our Sender Mark III to define this barrel as the barrel that is going to hopefully receive that item. And because this is locked to that position in the world, no matter where this modular router is, it's always going to send the items that we define here into this. And just like we did before, we're going to take our mob imprisonment tool, and inside of the cinder, we're going to make sure it's set to blacklist and match item components. And because this is empty, we want to avoid sending empty ones. We are only going to send ones that have mons in it. So as soon as I put this in here, it is then going to take that and teleport it into our factory. By the way, that card also does work cross-dimensionally. Now, this right here is probably the most important part. This is how we can use these mob imprisonment tools to determine whether or not a mon is shiny or not. Because all of the data that is stored inside of this mon is now inside of this imprisonment tool, meaning that we can actually read that data. There's a couple of mods that allow us to read data very easily, but one, Pipes, allows us to do it, I think, the easiest. The other would be Integrated Dynamics, but that mod requires a significant amount of coding knowledge. So I've gone ahead and taken this out, and what I want to do is I want to set these both to send. Now this side will be yes, is shiny. This side will be no, mon is not shiny. So to be able to determine this, we can use an advanced upgrade, and we can go ahead and hit add here, and we are going to add a filter for the mob imprisonment tool. Now it is looking specifically for this, but it also displays a ton of data in here, and you can actually get a ton more data off of this than what is actually listed right here. And to do this, you can do it in like a creative world or what have you, and you can just simply run like /cubejs space hand, and you can get all of the MBT that is actually on the item. But there's actually a very specific set of information that we do need to define in here. And so it's going to start off by defining the fact that we have a mob imprisonment tool. And then inside that, we need to say the component that is Pokemon, and we are checking is shiny. 1B means true. So shiny, true. And in this case, this is correct. By the way, I will have this in the description so you can actually copy this directly if you want to use this. But yes, this right here is defining shiny is true. And as soon as we accept this and we place this, this imprisonment tool in here, we're going to notice it is not shiny. So it doesn't end up in this modular router. Instead, it ends up in this one. But we want to make sure that this is being defined as not shiny. And that is a better way of doing this. So we're going to have both sides set up, and we're going to place the item in, and then we're going to define this as shiny. And to say not shiny or no shiny, we'll say 0B. This will say false. So is shiny false? And if we hit submit, that is now saved too. So whenever we put this in here, it's going to go much faster, and notice it still goes on this side because it is not shiny inside there. And unfortunately, I don't have a shiny just yet to be able to test, but the shiny one should go on the left-hand side. So now I want to handle the destruction of the mons that aren't shiny. This is going to be kind of important. So I want to drop this down. We have a mob masher that this can land on, and then I'm going to give it like a redstone block for right now. And this should basically kill anything that lands on top of it. I'm going to remove the block for now just to see if we can't get it to spawn, but I'm going to use an advanced clicker, and the advanced clicker, I believe if we're going to click on air, we have to target a space above a particular block. So for example, like this, and then when we put this in, it should spawn the mon on top of this. Let's maybe set this to down face. Okay. So here's kind of an unfortunate thing. It doesn't actually have a position to force the mob into. So we're running into a little bit of a problem where we need to be able to get this to right click it on something. And it does actually spawn them on, by the way, if there is a place under it. So if I keep taking this further down and I land down here, notice it does actually spawn. Okay, so I did manage to find a solution to this. I just have to have a block next to the position that we want it to fall down to. And then we need to make sure that it is clicking technically on that side. So facing east, we want it to click on the east face. And so I have it defined as such. And yeah, it is actually clicking on there now. Now, just to test this out, if I go ahead and put the mob in here, the mob then gets sent out, dropped right onto the mob masher, and it is over for that mon. So with that working, we then need to take the ball back out of here, or we need to take the imprisonment tool back out. So I'm going to select this, and then over here, what I want to do is have the imprisonment tool. So we need just a blank one. I guess we could just technically spawn this out of here. So we have the imprisonment tool, and we want to put this in match data, but make sure this is instead set to whitelist, so that way we only pull imprisonment tools that don't have any data in them. And then we're just about ready because our loop is about to start. I am then going to set a frequency of 17 because we were using 16 on the other dimensional chest. And then we'll just use a dimensional chest to send the item that is in here directly out and into this chest. And that way we can pull it back into our system back at our other side. Like on this side, I have my chest set to number 17. The mob imprisonment tool is in here. We then can use this modular router to pull, and remember, just like we did before, we're going to pull from the bottom or the down, make sure it's set to whitelist and match components. Then we'll make sure to place this inside. That should pull that imprisonment tool. And if we only use one, this should be perfectly fine to use a sender to send it back up into the other setting. And then we'll make sure mob imprisonment tool and then match item components. So that way it only ever tries to send this item into here. And so now if this loop has completed, we should be able to go grab like any mon that just happens to be nearby. For example, this one, which is honestly really large. I guess it will be a test of these mons that could be larger. That then gets taken and it has now been filtered, and we are stuck at a particular point because I didn't actually define the send, which is all we have to do. And then this loop should start. Okay, so as of right now, it should be in this modular router, or yeah, modular router setting right here. So we then just need a sender card. But this is going to be a pretty quick process, honestly. So on the sender card, because we don't have to define anything specific here, the way the sender works, we just simply put the sender card in. That's going to send the mon. The mon then gets spit out. And in this case, placed in kind of funny. I may actually need to extend this down a little bit more. But yeah, that did place it in a weird position. But the item should have gotten sent back. But for larger mons like this, maybe we do need to make sure this is a bit further down, and we can actually try and see if this will work. So we place this in. Will it actually spawn the mon here? It doesn't seem like it. That works, but that's not exactly what we want either. Huh. You know what? In this case, I think it might just be a good idea to make sure the mon gets spawned all the way down there directly on the crusher, and we can kind of test. That ends up making its way down there. And does this one make its way down there and start to take damage? It does. Okay, so that's all we need. Now let's handle the shinies. And this is the part that is going to be absolutely wild, is I'm going to show you a mechanic where you can actually catch the mons without actually catching the mons. Now for this plan, I think a stasis chamber might actually be the go-to. So what I plan on doing is having a stasis chamber on the bottom here that is going to stasis the mon that spawns, so that way it doesn't really move after we take it out of the tool. And that should leave it basically centered perfectly in this area. So to test this out, the mon is now in here. Notice it's not moving because it has like permanent slowness at the moment. With the mon basically stabilized, we can use a special feature of modular routers that is the security upgrade. And this is what's going to allow the modular router to catch the mons on our behalf. So the security upgrade is pretty important, as it is going to basically make it as if it's me clicking these Pokeballs. So we're going to have a modular router with an activator. The activator is going to click down, and we can set this to sneak, to basically sneak throw the ball that is going to be directly down below it. And it's just going to simply right click. We don't have to specify anything else. It's just whatever's in this buffer is going to be done that way. And then the security upgrade goes in to act as me clicking it. And then I'm going to set this to pulse mode, place the balls in, the master balls specifically, and then just give it a redstone signal. And that should catch the mon. We may have to do some finagling here, but the goal is that the mon will get summoned. It'll go right there, and it should stay rather centered. Yeah, it should stay rather centered. We may have to put some upgrades in to make sure nothing happens, but then the ball gets sent out by just simply giving it a redstone signal with a master ball. And because we're catching shinies, this can be just fine. And look, it went into my PC. By the way, to make sure the stasis chamber reacts faster, because as of right now it's doing these pulses, we can put this in, and this will make sure with those upgrades that it goes significantly faster. We shouldn't have a moment where the mons kind of go out of whack. Now, we also need to get the spawning, so we're going to be doing the exact same setup that we did over here, where the Mon gets spawned. However, I'm going to spawn them right on the ground. So I've got that facing the ground here, and I am going to test it by putting the Rattata down here. That should spawn it. You can see it is stuck right there in that position. And then we need to figure out a way to give this a redstone pulse. Oh, so sometimes it's not super accurate. And I wonder if this is being caused from the sneaking. I don't even know if it needs to sneak. No, maybe we need to put the modular router a bit closer. Actually, believe it or not, I managed to get this to work by taking the activator and set it to look below instead of where it was looking. And now that it's set to look below, I think it is sending it almost perfectly straight down. It's definitely not 100%. I think lowering this would work. So you know what? Just to test, we'll place in the new Mon, much larger Mon, by the way. And yes, with the larger Mons, we have to make sure this is a little bit taller. There's like a lot of variables at play here for getting this to work. I mean, I'm trying my best here, but the idea is still solid. I've just got to figure out what's the perfect height. You know what? This seems really good. And even for the smaller ones, I think this is almost perfect. Just to put it in perspective, this is a Igglybuff. Oh, and it did have enough time to move, but it's still within range. So this, I think, is a good height right here. How high up is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks up. Now we've just got to give this a redstone signal, and to do that, we could use an entity detector from Draconic Evolution, as this has the ability to send a redstone pulse whenever a entity comes within its vicinity. So you can set the range, we can set it to match any, and so long as there is a Mon within range of this, it will send a redstone signal. So what I'm wondering is, can we set the range to be within 5 blocks and it just be right next to it here? And so long as I walk into this, it sends a redstone signal. So that is pretty straightforward and easy to get set up. Before we go any further, something I do want to mention, definitely click the plus button and set the hostile mode and set it to passive mobs only. And then you can set the range, so that way you're not triggering it whenever you walk up to it. I just tested it and it works perfect. And now perfect. I've got the Cinder sending the shinies that would end up in here. The shinies would then be thrown down there and actually caught. And then the hostile ones I did upgrade, and now this is set to a mob masher, which should destroy these Mons no problem whatsoever. Then everything gets sent back, and so we should be able to get by with just simply using a single mob imprisonment tool in this setup. So I think at this point, we're basically ready to go. All I need to do is fill a dimensional chest with Poké Snacks, and yeah, we're ready to kick things off. And you know what? I think placing this down here, remembering this is channel 16 for the actual Poké Snacks, setting that in place, and then we can just use pushers possibly. That may be fast enough if we use multiple. Now, as soon as I put these in, it is going to start technically doing its thing, where it is going to be sending those, and we're going to notice these are being placed in. Now, to start, this is going to be a pretty slow process. Notice, by the way, this already spawned in. And I'm wondering, mob imprisonment tool, are you going to collect this Mon? Okay, you're not, surprisingly enough. Is it because you're too close? Oh, okay. So we may still have to figure out a solution for getting them pushed a little closer to the clicker, but I mean, this is working. I'm wondering if the corner blocks are going to be trouble. It should definitely not be trouble. Notice, by the way, this ended up getting sent back. What I'm going to do, instead of using a simple clicker, we're going to use an advanced clicker, and then we're going to define the range. And yeah, there's no need for us to even worry here, because we're going to be able to completely encase this entire area for it to click. We just have to give it power, but we've already solved that over here. And wow, already this is working incredibly fast. You can see all of the Mons currently being generated right now and being captured and sent through this process. Absolutely ridiculous. And something I do want to check, by the way, if we're away from this within 64 blocks, we don't have to worry about anything. But if we pop on over here and we take a look at the Mob Crusher, Yes, there's a lot of items that are being spread all over the place, and we are going to need a way to collect these. This can be solved by simply using a sophisticated storage barrel with an item collector, and then over here an experience collector to be able to collect this all up. And we'll set that to ignored. Everything else should be fine. And my goodness, this is unreal. Now I want to be able to observe this, so I did place a security camera in from Security Craft and shift right clicked it with a monitor, so that way I can link to it. And that way, whenever we're over here and this is actually functioning, we should be able to peer into it to be able to get a bird's eye view of what's actually going on. So we should be able to see all of the Mons being taken on. If I click into this, notice they're over there in the corner, and they are definitely being killed, which is kind of funny. Not all of them, though, it looks like. Or, no, actually, they are all basically instantly being taken out. Look at this. This is so crazy. This whole setup is just absolutely absurd. It is happening so fast. All of these Mons are being spawned in, and if we AFK here long enough, the chances of a shiny spawning should happen. We just got a shiny Ralts that just spawned, and I'm assuming it spawned from the candy, and it just said a Ralts was added to my PC. I'm assuming that that one was a shiny that was from this farm. We just watched it happen, even though I am farming them technically. And there we go. It was caught in a master ball, which means that this automatically caught it, and we actually just seen that happen. That's so wild. Okay, that happened way faster than I was expecting. So we have this working. Things are definitely spawning. These are spawning up top because of that 64 condition that I mentioned before, where it considers a block location, which they shouldn't, by the way, spawn up top here. But I want to see now, can we cut and paste this in another area? Everything should be cut and pastable and easily selectable with the way that I have this thing defined. So, moment of truth, cross my fingers and hope that none of this fails. Let's cut this whole thing out of existence. And all the cakes, by the way, should transfer over. And it is going to place in some more cakes. We may want to add some sort of lever or something to toggle this off before moving. But this is all now stored inside of our cut paste gadget. And then I'll just go in here and we'll just clean those up. And then let's say we want to do it right here. We want to make sure we're about 64 blocks up. We have a bunch of water Mons that do spawn right here. So if we're above something like a river, we should get a particular type of Mon. I can use an angel block here to define our set point and then raise this up so that way we're not actually on this. Anchor, and then just paste it in. And I'm assuming the Mons are going to kick off and be captured and everything is going to be working. This is ridiculous. Okay, can I use Security Craft to peer back into my base from all the way over here? Oh my goodness, I can, and I can actually see all of them working. This is ridiculously good. And I honestly feel like I've outdone myself on this one. Yep, definitely. By the way, something I did have to do, place light panels up here just to prevent the Mons from spawning up on the very, very top. But like I said, I will have a schematic for this and it will be posted over on the Discord. You're not going to want to miss this schematic. Absolutely fantastic. Now, not everything is going to transfer over in a schematic. For example, these cells will not, but I mean, the idea of it and the placement is going to be on there for you to use. And you can use the schematic with the schematic table as I used at the beginning. And there you go. Have fun grinding out shinies in an AFK format. Absolutely absurd. Now, one more thing with this setup. So yes, as much as I love the novelty of Pokeballs being thrown and at actually catching it, sometimes it might miss. And if you're not around to actually see if it does catch, I do recommend probably setting up something like this, an advanced clicker that is set in a range like so that way when the Mon does spawn, you can make sure to capture it inside of a mob imprisonment tool that is separate from everything else. So this mob imprisonment tool is just being supplied a constant supply, only keeping one in stock that is being pulled in from the modular router here. And then in the back, this is, once it catches, being pulled out, just like we did earlier with our puller card, making sure that this is set up with blacklist and match components. And that is then pulling it back into here, which then just sends it into this barrel here. And yes, I've already caught several shinies. There's a lot. And these I will be catching manually. Like, look at that. That's a shiny Ditto right there. Like, all of these things, all of these Mons. A Froakie? Yeah, absolutely wild. And this is just the beginning. At this point, I honestly don't know what's more Team Rocket. I am going to literally have them all of them. And I'm doing it in the most exploitative way possible. With that, it's time for me to just simply AFK and see how many Mons I can get by the next episode. And guys, if you did enjoy today's episode, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video a huge thumbs up. And without further ado, it's time for me to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to Padre Q. Thank you so much for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting my content in one of the best ways possible. Thank you so very much. And guys, I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. And as always, thanks for watching.